buckle in, grab a drink, grab a snack, because we're gonna be talking for quite a little while. Alright, so what we are talking about today is why I felt personally betrayed by season 4 of Sherlock. Let me preface this by saying I was obsessed with BBC Sherlock. This video is hard to make because it is hard to accept the fact that my favorite thing in the world was terrible. If you haven't watched like season 4, then just don't watch this because none of it's gonna make sense. I want to say I loved this show because I thought the creators were so clever, and I thought they were so smart, and the way that they wrote things, that like pieces were just connecting all over the place, and they loved parallels, and I loved parallels because I loved drawing like things from the first episode to things in the 9th episode. I just thought it was brilliant, and so I was expecting something brilliant for season 4. Now let's get into season 4, episode 1, the Six Thatchers. The first thing that's really weird about this episode is that the Six Thatchers is already a case. John's blog was actually a website that you could go to and read the cases, and the Six Thatchers was a case that already happened a while ago. So it kind of threw me off. It threw a lot of people off that the Six Thatchers was nothing like the case that we had read about on his blog. It was a completely different thing. I gave the first episode a lot of leniency because it was the first episode. If it was weird, they would probably explain it in the 2nd episode or the 3rd episode. I wasn't giving up hope, but they didn't explain any of it. Mary died. I was so skeptical of Mary's death scene because the TV show Sherlock told us to be skeptical about things like that. Mary's death was very cheesy Hollywood. There was a big splurt of blood, she like fell backwards, and she had like 2 to 5 minutes of consciousness to say goodbye to John, and she had superhuman speed to give her the ability to jump in front of a bullet that was aimed at Sherlock, so okay. Also, another red flag is that we've already seen someone get shot in the same place. And we were told, it's not like it is in the movies. There's not a big splurt of blood and you go flying backwards.
It's not like it is in the movies. There's not a great big spurt of blood and you go flying backwards.
But that's exactly what happened to Mary. So I was skeptical about her being dead at all. And also, the whole Agra thing, alright? Okay, so in the last episode of the 3rd season, she said that Agra was her initials, but that's not true. Agra was an acronym, the first letter of like each of their names, you know, like her squad. And so why would she lie about the fact that Agra was her initials if she expected John to read the flash drive? None of it adds up. Everything doesn't. It's so frustrating. I cannot stand it. Let's move on to the lying detective. Now, I don't actually have much to say about the lying detective because I really liked this episode. This episode was very good, but it felt so misplaced because it was sandwiched between these 2 terrible, terrible episodes. The Lying Detective felt like season 3 or season 2 or those good parts of the show that I loved so much. It had a thrilling plot, it had an evil villain, it had a near-death experience. It was really, really good, and the cliffhanger at the end was so good, and I was like, wow, okay, so the first episode was just kind of weird. 2nd episode, all good. 3rd episode, not so much. Wait, let me go back to the Six Thatchers for a second, because I forgot that this happened in the Six Thatchers. John blamed Sherlock for Mary's death, which he would never do that. Can we talk about that for a second? He would never blame Sherlock for something like that. Like, John was there. He witnessed what happened. Yes, John is an emotional man, but he's not an idiot, all right? And he wouldn't push Sherlock away like that. And I didn't like it because it was so out of character for him to turn on Sherlock like that, but not turn on his lying, murderous wife. So anyway, now back to the lying detective. All in all, I really liked this episode because it felt good. And there's this one video on YouTube that analyzes this one sequence in The Lying Detective, and I highly recommend you watch it. It's kind of irrelevant to what I'm talking about, but it's just so good. The thing that kind of pissed me off about The Lying Detective was the fact that it was like, yeah, look, we can do all these cool things, but we're just not gonna do it for the other episodes. It's just right here for you to look at and for you to want. And it was just beautiful cinematography, creative camera angles, and Wonderful, wonderful storytelling. Another thing I want to talk about The Lying Detective, they brought up the memory drug. Why would they bring up such an interesting and important thing and just not bring it up again? Like, if we're gonna put our tinfoil hats on right now, I could say that, like, maybe they did bring up the drug, but we just didn't know it. Maybe that's why the Six Thatchers was so weird, because maybe Mary used the memory drug and she actually isn't dead, but John and Sherlock were all drugged up and they were just filling in the pieces of her death because she actually didn't die. And so it's like, it makes enough sense for it to pass, but not enough for it to be solid. Moving on to the final problem. I don't even want to talk about this episode. It makes me so furious. So this whole episode, it felt like a mixture of James Bond and Saw or something. It was like cheesy action movie and like mixed with the horror of like that death maze thing. The Lying Detective ends and there's a gun being shot at John. And then the final problem happens and he's fine. Oh, it was just a tranquilizer. Thank goodness. Like, what? No. That is not the writing that I know and love. What are you doing? Everything is so wrong, okay? So Moriarty films little reaction gifs for Sherlock's sister, and also the 3 Garridebs. Okay, the 3 freaking Garridebs. If you are unfamiliar with the Arthur Conan Doyle stories, the 3 Garridebs is a very important one. It is like the first time that John Watson sees that Sherlock is actually human and is more than just this calculating mystery machine. And it's very touching, and it's very beautiful, and it's so lovely and wonderful. And they just crapped all over it. Okay, and the whole Redbeard thing. Okay, first of all, what? Redbeard was not a kid. I don't care what you tell me in the final problem. Redbeard was a dog. Like, why was there a dog bowl with the name Redbeard on it, but Redbeard is a kid? Did you make the kid eat out of a dog bowl? I don't understand. I thought Molly was so sweet in the first season and stuff, and I was just like, she could not get a break. She was in love with Sherlock, who would never love her back. She was in love with Jim, who became, Moriarty. It's just, she just could not catch a break. And then 3rd season rolls around, and she, has kind of moved on. She's become way stronger and more confident in herself, and I'm like, yes, this is the character development that I'm here for. And then the scene happens when Sherlock calls Molly and has to say I love you to her, or has to get her to say I love you. I don't remember exactly what it was because I don't care. But putting my tinfoil hat back on, if you wanted to fix the final problem, which seems like an impossible task, I know, but if you wanted to fix the final problem, one way you could do it is say that John actually did get shot by Eurus. And the final problem is like him being passed out and in this fever dream type state. And so he's fabricated this story in his head. And that's what we saw. I want to believe that because I just cannot bring myself to believe the fact that they did that. They did the final problem. And out of all these problems, I didn't even begin to talk about how I'm salty that they didn't end up together at all. Or even talk about their feelings. Because those feelings are there. They've been there since Arthur Conan Doyle wrote the books. I'm not going to get into that part because if you want to know why I think that and why it would make total sense for it to happen in the show, watch TJLC Explained. Even if you're not into the whole John Locke thing, just watch it anyway because it's so interesting. The history and facts are so cool. Just watch it and you'll understand my pain even more. And also that series will explain things way better than I ever could about the history of the relationship between John and Sherlock. So now I'm gonna go through the list of the questions that don't make sense. This was a list that I found on Tumblr, and then I added and edited things on it. I completely forgot to say something. In the final problem, the whole girl on the plane and everyone's asleep. What? Okay, if you want to get metaphorical about it, it could really make sense. If you see the girl on the plane as the analytical, critical viewers that were frankly displeased with the series, and you saw everyone else that was asleep as the casual viewers, then it makes a little bit of sense. Because she's on the phone with Sherlock and she's like, I need help, I don't know what's happening, everything is wrong, we're crashing to the ground. And that's about how I was feeling when I was watching the series. And then she says even the pilots are asleep. Going off that metaphor, that kind of makes sense. Like what happened to the writers? Why did they do this? Or did they write this while they were drunk and asleep? Plain thing didn't even make sense at all in the story, unless you look at it through a metaphorical lens. But anyway, again, tinfoil hat off. Without further ado, why was the skull painting different in literally every scene? Why kill Mary if she's good? Why give her that lame redemption arc? If you like pause the frame and like zoom in on like what John is doing, he's at one point sitting in 221B blogging. Not super out of, character, but he was blogging about the baby being born. Before the baby is born. And also, if you zoom in closer, the image on his screen is a screenshot. Like, there's like, it's screen. I don't understand why this lack of detail is just flying by. What was John's letter to Sherlock, and why do we never hear anything about it again? Molly comes out and gives Sherlock a letter that John wrote, and that is all we hear about it. We never get to read it. We never get to hear what Sherlock thinks about it. We never get a resolution. Nothing. Radio silence on the letter. Why did the abominable bride prove that Moriarty wasn't dead, when it only proved that you need a friend to help you make the blood splatter? Also, who was taking care of the baby when everyone that they know was in that therapist house? How did John get out of the stupid well if his feet were chained to the bottom? Does he not have feet anymore? Did he chop them off? Why bring up that romantic entanglement would complete you as a human being if you don't return to it? Literally, what was the point of that entire scene? And John was talking about missed chances, and you only get one chance at life, and like you can't let the person you love get away or something. And it's like, what are you talking about? Mary was your wife. So he wasn't talking about Mary, but the only person it would make sense he was talking about with all the things he was saying would be Sherlock, but it wasn't Sherlock because they never went back to it, and it just doesn't make sense. Why did nobody know who John was in The Lying Detective when in The Hounds of Baskerville everyone knew it was his blog? He writes the blog in first person, literally. This really, it wasn't like so much of a criticism, but something that like threw up a red flag. It was like one of those things I was like, is this reality? Because ever since the Abominable Bride, it's been kind of weird, like, and hard to tell what's reality and what isn't. Nobody recognized John, even though he has a picture of himself on his website and his blog is famous, and that's how everyone knows about Sherlock Holmes. Why did the blog stop since season 4 started? That has been on my mind constantly, because all throughout season 3, the blog was being updated. All throughout season 2, the blog was being updated. How does everyone know the story of the Merchant of Samara when it's not actually that common? I was wondering that too. How did John have an affair with a woman, but he doesn't recognize her when she's sitting right in front of him at therapy? Why has Mycroft been so clearly linked to Moriarty? In parentheses, I put M theory. If you want to know more about M theory, it's too much to talk about in this video, but I will link the M theory below. Why set up the footage that a shooting can be altered? Why is it the very first scene in the season? I thought this would be the theme of the whole season, that with editing, anything can look like anything. This is so important, okay? I can't believe I didn't talk about this. So the very opening scene was them editing to make it look like Sherlock actually didn't kill the dude and it was some other dude and whatever, and Minecraft was like, yeah, well, with editing anything, we can make anything look like anything. Anyway, so I thought that would be so much bigger. It should have been so much bigger. Why have Culverton say that line about revealing your secret to your friends when it's completely irrelevant thereafter? What are you talking about? What secret? Who are you talking to? If Mycroft knew who Mary is, then why didn't he ever say anything? What is the point of all the mirrors if nothing ever comes of it? Okay, and all throughout the promos, they were saying that they were making history, making television history by telling the right version of Sherlock. How is this the right version? How is giving him a murderous sister the right version? How was this historical? It was just a bad show. And then the whole Sherlock's in love, but with who thing. Like, that's just cruel, okay? That's just... Shut up. How does Mary know where to go when Sherlock texts "the curtain rises," but texts John the actual address? Let's talk about the mysterious crypt layer that Sherlock has for one scene and then never returns to. We've never seen this crypt layer before. So John says over the speaker, Vatican cameos, like, Sherlock, get out of there, things are about to go bad. Sherlock pulls out his earpiece. In what world would Sherlock do that? In what world would Sherlock ignore a Vatican cameos from John? I hate to go back to season 3, But what was Sherlock gonna say on the tarmac? Because you know he was gonna say something and then he changed his mind. It's like literally classic body language, like that is what happened. But we never know. I mean, we all know what he was gonna say. And why does Sherlock go to see Ella and talk about a recurring dream in a weird ass attic office, but it never comes back around? Why weren't they in her normal office, where John went? Why be so obsessed with Sherlock's sex life throughout the series and never bring it to anything? How do you survive being exploded from a second-story flat with no injuries? How can you possibly redeem Eurus after everything she's done? Honestly, enough said. Why did Eurus have a random breakdown in the middle of her grand plan? Eurus said that she drowned Redbeard, like an actual child was missing, and the suspect said this. And they didn't think to check all of the wells. How did his family all agree to pretend that this Redbeard was a dog and never mention his sister ever again? Eurus appears to have super mind control powers. Okay, my next thing is about like why even make the stupid memory drug, and it says unless it's to show that memories can be altered, and this whole season/episode was altered. Why have every episode been focused on how relationships are more important than the stories, but then Video Mary is all like relationships don't matter because yay, detective stories. Who you are doesn't matter. The whole episode is about how his childhood is what makes Sherlock who he is, but the episode ends with, but who you are doesn't matter. How did they get onto the boat? A helicopter? Why not just take it to the island? How did Sherlock get inside as a member of the team? They only found John and Mycroft. How was the chess game promo a spoiler? Okay, so you guys probably didn't know about this, but promo picture that got leaked, and it was apparently a huge scandal. It was like a huge spoiler. Blogs are being shut down for having that picture on their blog. Lamp hell. Same as skull hell, but with lamps. What was the lie in The Lying Detective? Why was the episode called The Final Problem? The final problem was established to be to burn the heart out of Sherlock, and the final problem had 0 heart. It was basically Saw. Why did Sherlock paste John's face on the Vitruvian Man in The Sign of 3? Okay, this wasn't season 4, but also I cannot let this go. And yeah, that's all I have. Thank you guys for watching. If you have stuck through this whole thing, then congratulations, you are actually like my favorite people in the whole world. Like, it's just like hands down. Anyway, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time. Probably less angry than I was today. Bye.